Breaking news into CBS Sports HQ. Most anticipated lottery in 20 years. Since '03, LeBron. The San Antonio Spurs will have the first pick in the 2023 NBA draft, which means they win the lottery for Victor Wembanyama. This is how it played out. It came down to the Spurs and the Hornets. San Antonio with that 14% chance getting number one. The Hornets slot in at 2, and the Blazers moved up to 3. You can see the Pistons, a 17-win team from a season ago, down to 5 in between the Blazers and Detroit, the Houston Rockets. All right, let's get some insight on this. Adam Finkelstein, director of Scouting 24/7 Sports. We also have Avery Johnson, who's been part of something like this before, and we'll get some insight from that perspective as well. But let me start with you, Adam. Obviously, they get the center, and this isn't just your ho-hum center. Wembanyama has some serious skills. How does this transform this team that's been at the height of championships and has dropped down in recent years with San Antonio?
Well, this was a scenario that they planned years to give themselves a chance to be in this position, knowing that the chances were minuscule. 14% was as high of a chance as anybody had, and they still believed that this potential outcome was so significant that it was worth, I know we don't say tanking, but tanking for. And it worked. I mean, this is a generational talent by everyone's expectations. Don't take my word for it. LeBron has already called him a generational talent. Steph, Giannis, they've all said it. I mean, you're talking 7'4" with an 8-foot wingspan, one of the best defensive prospects we've ever seen, a guy who can already shoot the ball out to the three-point line with incredible skill for his size. And on top of that, he's a fluid mover at his size. This is, he is as good as potentially advertised. You hate to put these kind of expectations on him, but it's just the consensus right now. No one is saying any different. There is no doubt that he will be the number 1 pick in the draft, and the San Antonio Spurs will take him.
All right, Avery, I know you got to be feeling pretty good about this. You've been a part of a Spurs team that went through this with Tim Duncan, a team that had David Robinson. They drafted Tim Duncan 1 overall as well. You were a point guard on that team. How do you suppose this is going to rejuvenate Coach Pop and take this Spurs organization back to where they once were?
First of all, Jim, Adam, I can remember in 1997 when we got Tim Duncan. I was running all around my house with my young kids who are now 30 and 27. But this is an amazing opportunity for the Spurs to get a generational talent. This guy, I'm just going to call him Wemby.
Yes.
That's his name, Wemby. He's going to be amazing in San Antonio to be able to go there. My jersey's retired in San Antonio, part of that first championship team. This guy's going to continue to add to the Spurs legacy, to be able to follow in the footsteps of the Tim Duncans, the David Robinson, also my buddy Sean Elliott, who got drafted 3rd in the 1989 draft, another world champion and a world-class guy. The Spurs, man, wait till you see what happens with the Spurs season tickets right now. I'm telling you, folks are going to be lined up. Really excited. This is the best news the Spurs have had in years. They're moving into a $500 million new practice facility. Michael Dell has bought 1/3 of the team with a private equity group. Lots of positives and excitement for the Spurs fans. And I know everybody around San Antonio right now are on the street celebrating, saying, "Go Spurs, go," because this is the best news that they've had in years.
Yeah, and you can understand why. Not only does the San Antonio Spurs organization have experience with star-studded centers, but they've also had French stars as well, Boris Diaw as well as Tony Parker, that have starred in their uniforms. So this is an ideal organization. How do you suppose he fits with Coach Pop and this team specific to their roster?
To be honest with you, I think it's a matter of how they fit to him.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's that talented, and this is a guy you build around. And this is someone, listen, they've got young talent there. They've got Jeremy Sohan, and they're going to be a nice interior combination. Sohan, not really much of a shooter, terrific defender. I mean, talk about that interior defensive tandem. Wemby and Sohan, I mean, they're going to be a terror for a decade plus to come. But this is a team that that had quality young pieces, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, some others. But what they didn't have was the young star in the making. Well, guess what? They got it now. So you've got a young nucleus that can grow together. And I think Avery said it just there. They're going to sell tickets right away. Wemby said he wants to win a championship as soon as possible. We'll see how long that takes, but this is going to be a process. But I think every piece from here on out, the question is going to be, how did they fit with Wemby?
Yeah, that's a great point right there. Avery, you know, it's interesting because Coach Pop has had experience with two different types of centers, two different types of games in Robinson and Duncan. How do you suppose this works for Wemby with regards to having Coach Pop as his next head coach?
Well, Jim, don't call Tim Duncan a center. He always wanted to be known as a power forward. So let's get that straight. He's had some experience with one center and David Robinson.
Fair enough.
But no, all jokes aside, I think Coach Popovich's experience, you know, not only coaching with the Spurs, but winning a gold medal with our national team. You know, he's been an assistant before. He's coached a lot of different talented players, even going back to Chris Webber when he was an assistant on Don Nelson's team with the Golden State Warriors. So a lot of different points of inflection with different generational type talented players. He's coached a lot of foreign players. He knows how to communicate with those guys. A lot of late night dinners on the road. That's part of the secret to success. So I think this is going to be a seamless transition. And this is why I think Coach Popovich wanted to stick around for at least another year or two before handing the reins to another coach to ensure that if it was Wemby at the first pick, that they can get him up and going in this Spurs culture, which has been one of the best cultures in all of professional sports, not just in the NBA.
Absolutely, Avery. He might be around for another 5 years. Adam, let's take a look at how this played out, because I know that while we were watching this, you were thinking, hey, maybe Jordan and the Hornets, you know, maybe MJ and the Hornets. So the Hornets get 2, the Blazers get 3, Rockets 4, Pistons 5. And we've talked about the top 5 players in this draft. In terms of how it shook out, how do you suppose this impacts? Let's go 2 and 3 right away, Hornets and Blazers, with regards to fits for those teams.
So the Hornets' decision, in my mind, is going to come down to Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller. And Scoot Henderson, a dynamic, athletic, attacking lead guard. Brandon Miller was the best freshman in college basketball this year at Alabama. 6'9", skilled wing who can really shoot it, developing as a playmaker. They've got LaMelo Ball there. So I think Brandon Miller is the fit. I think if they decide Scoot Henderson is the better prospect, he and LaMelo can play together. I would lean towards Miller at this point in time because I do think he fits better with Ball. They got Mark Williams, who they drafted last year as a rim-protecting center. All of a sudden now they've got a nice young core that can continue to develop. But I think they're going to really take their time and figure out which of those two is in the mix. Do they consider one of the Thompson twins? Yeah. I think they got to do their due diligence. But at the end of the day, right now, I think it's got to be Brandon Miller who's the favorite at this point.
And Avery, you know, I know that you've had a little a glance at some of these players. You were a point guard yourself. You've been part of organizations that have won as a player as well as a coach. So what would be the mindset with regards to, say, the Hornets at 2 with regards to fit versus best available player?
I totally agree with Adam here. This is about the fit. All right, you already have LaMelo Ball. You can go back and see how many teams have made mistakes over the years. Remember years ago, Minnesota took point guards in the same draft, or back-to-back drafts. You can't do it. You already have your point guard. If you're sold on LaMelo Ball, then this is a Brandon Miller conversation. And let's be real. This conversation for Brandon Miller in terms of fit, best available, would not even be a conversation had there not been an unfortunate incident that obviously he wasn't implicated in at Alabama. So Brandon Miller is the second best player in the draft. It's just there were some situations off the court that brought some of his character into question. He hasn't been charged with anything. This kid outside of that incident has had impeccable behavior on and off the court. He is the second coming of Kevin Durant in a lot of ways. So again, if there's no question marks, which I don't feel there are, Brandon Miller is the best player, not only available, but the best fit for the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, certainly an interesting perspective from a standpoint of, does Henderson drop beyond Portland because Dame is there as well with regards to fits as well?
Well, I think Portland's question right now is, do they keep the pick? Do they rebuild? If they keep the pick, Dame's not going to be happy.
There could be a Dame
so
trade.
Does Dame get moved? Does the pick get moved? I think that's the question that's going to turn into one of the next themes of this draft.
Absolutely. Avery Johnson, his Spurs win the top pick in the 2023 NBA draft. Our thanks to Avery Johnson and Adam Finkelstein. And this is how Gary Parrish sees it with his NBA mock draft, with Wemby going 1 to the Spurs, Brandon Miller, the fit for the Hornets, at 2, Scoot Henderson going to the Blazers. So again, what does that mean for Dame? And you see, it's not Thompson twins back-to-back in his mock draft, with Walker in at 5 to the Pistons, only a 17-win team a season ago.